Hello, and welcome to Stephoodle. I am, frustratingly, Steph. And this doll. This is the make it work that almost wasn't. For context, I was originally planning to have this video ready for the end of March, and it's the 19th of April when I'm recording this voiceover, so you may have seen my post about it in the community tab, where I referred to it as cursed. But I was able to finish her after all, so yay! I was originally inspired by Moonlight Jewel and Etellan's Bratz collab. I'm still a little too nervous to customize a standard Bratz doll, and I think the only one in my stock box is from 2015, and they have really big heads. But I do have a few Bratzillas in my stock box. This is, from what I gather, a Midnight Beach Jade J'adore. She glows in the dark, so she's made out of this translucent pale green plastic, and I thought she would make an adorable alien gal. I used my hairdryer to heat up the head so I could remove it. It popped off like a lot more easily than I thought it would, and the neck peg is interesting. It only moves from side to side. I used a chopstick to pop out the inset eyes while the head was still warm. Apologies for the body horror. I cut the hair close to the scalp. Then I cut out a head cap. The neck hole was way too small to get the rest of the hair out through, and it'll allow me to insert her new eyes later. I removed her factory paint with pure acetone. It's so nice when it comes off easily. I carefully opened up the eye holes by cutting away the excess vinyl inside the head. Let's start with the eyes. I compared the ones she came with to my hemisphere mold to check what sizes to try out. I'll be making the bases out of polymer clay for the first time. I wanted to have black scleras, so I'll be using black clay, unsurprisingly. After kneading and conditioning the clay, I pushed a small piece into the mold. I cut off the excess clay with a craft knife. To create the divot for the iris, I used the silicone tip from a friction pen, as it seemed like the perfect size. Then I rolled the clay between my fingers to help reshape it and make it less squished. I repeated this process a few times in 2 different sizes and baked them. Resin time! I'm finally using resin for a project. Hooray! I mixed some UV resin with pearl white pigment and iridescent snow glitter. Then I carefully filled the eye bases with the resin and cured it under my UV lamp. I forgot to film this part, but here's a little reenactment. I didn't feel super confident about doughing the eyes with resin, and I wanted the clay to be shiny as well. So instead, I put a small amount of resin in my hemisphere mold, one size up from the one I used for the clay. Then I pressed the eye into it, coating the entire surface with a thin layer of resin. After curing, I had some nice shiny eyes. And here's what they look like in the head. I think they look really cool. I'll be giving her some pointy alien ears with clay, so I thought it was best to pop her head back on her body first. And it was as easy to put back on as it was to remove, which is baffling. I've never had a head removal and replacement so easy as this. I used sewing pins to create an armature for her antennae. Antennae? Antennae. I'm looking it up.
Antennae.
Okay, so I used sewing pins to create an armature for her antennae and push them into the head cap. I used some hot glue to help keep them from moving around during sculpting. I mixed my 2-part Apoxie Sculpt together with the magic of editing! And then it was time to sculpt. I want to do more fun edits like that, but I always forget to film them. But I remembered this time, yay! It took me 3 tries to get the ears the way I wanted them. Once I was happy with the ears and antennae, I let them cure overnight. The next day I sanded and painted them both a spring green. After letting them dry for a few days, I gave them a layer of matte varnish. And here's where my troubles really started. At first, I tried doing the face up at this stage, thinking I could blend the painted clay into the translucent vinyl with clever use of blushing, but it looked awful. So I ended up having to go back and paint the entire doll. Well, most of it. I didn't bother with the torso because her outfit was going to cover that. Once dry, I added a new coat of matte varnish. With that dry, I sprayed on Mr. Super Clear, and when I went to go start the face up, I noticed that either a cat hair or a paintbrush bristle was stuck in the sealant. I tried to very carefully remove it, and in doing so, accidentally removed an area of paint about the size of a pea from her forehead. It was at this point that I set her aside for about a week. I've been working on 2 other dolls at the same time as this one, and as such, I've been pretty stressed out. I was kind of resigned to not finishing her for a couple of months, or even abandoning her entirely. But eventually, I picked her back up, I repaired her paint job, sprayed her with 2 coats of MSC, and got on with the face up. I made a sketch of the facial markings I wanted her to have, and start by mapping those out with light green watercolor pencil, and I'll fill them in with black. Apologies for the jump in time there. I was trying to add pink tones underneath her eyes and they weren't working at all, so I decided to just keep things simple. As usual, when I can't build any more color or I want to save my progress, I give her another spray of MSC, waiting a half an hour between each coat. I brushed on some darker green pastel to add dimension to her face, and I added the same blushing to her antennae. I added some highlights in white, and went back over the black areas with a brush, picking up the pigment directly from my pencil. There were still a bunch of imperfections and wonky areas in her paint, so I decided the best way to camouflage it would be to add a bunch of freckles. I hadn't planned for them, but honestly, this is what saved her for me. The added texture and personality made her look really sweet. To help her eyes stand out, I added silver to her eyelids and some pink triangular lower lashes. I later go over them with acrylic paint. And of course, I had to add some sparkle with macropearl PearlEx powder. And that's the face up done. Then I wrapped up the head and blushed the body and added freckles and sparkle to match the face. I decided to gloss the silver eyelids to bring back their metallic sheen before installing her eyes. Oh, she looks so sweet! I used super glue to reattach her head cap and painted her scalp blue. Is it the same blue as the yarn wefts I made? No, it is not, but it's close enough, and that's fine. I think that's the theme of this doll. That's fine. I prepared my wefts off camera with acrylic yarn. I start by gluing them from the bottom and the back and work my way up and around. I also ended up gluing some loose fiber under and around the antennae to help sort of cover that area, but it was really fiddly and I ended up not catching it on camera. I also added a couple of pink sections to the front as a bit of an homage to Alan and An from Sailor Moon R. I really want to make dolls of those two, and I know what bases I want to use for them, but they aren't in my stock box currently. Would you like to see me make them in the future? Let me know in the comments. Once I get to the top, I glue a weft on going the opposite direction that I will flip over once it's dry, acting as a part. I use a piece of washi tape to make sure the weft stays separate from the rest of the hair so it's easier to flip over later. I also add a couple of wefts going in the right direction on top of the first one, as I find this helps hide the glue better. Once dry, I flip over the parting weft and remove the washi tape. Then I use a toothbrush and water to smooth everything out and let it dry overnight. The next day, I cut and style the hair off camera. I find the process a bit awkward to film with my current setup, so that's why I do it that way. And I swear, I didn't intend to give her my haircut from back when I was in high school and early university, but here we are. I think it's really cute though, it has some Y2K vibes to it, so I'm happy with it. These Ever After High Cupid boots were the only shoes I found in my stash that seemed to fit her well enough. I painted them black, adding silver to the straps and the soles. And I painted the hearts pink, topping them with a violet blue color shift paint, just for that little bit extra. Then I gave them a couple of coats of matte Mod Podge. I didn't realize that her feet actually stretched the boots a bit, so later I ended up having to touch up the black paint after getting her dressed before the photo shoot, so that's fun. This coat, using Enchanterium's Maddie Hatter coat pattern, is my first ever machine sewn doll garment. It went okay. Let's not talk about how I accidentally sewed the bottom sections to the collar instead of the bodice first. It's a bit rough around the edges. I think I still prefer hand sewing for small things, but maybe I just need a bit more practice. To add a bit of visual interest to the coat, and to cover up the holes on the collar, I'll be adding a bubbly border on the hem and the collar with a blue Posca paint pen. First I drew out the shapes and then I filled them in. I went over them about 3 times in total to achieve the right opacity. And here it is all done. I'll be adding a belt to cover the dodgy waist seam. I was originally going to use this holographic stuff, but it didn't work out really well. It was a bit too stiff, so I replaced it with a Monster High Spectra belt from my stock box that I painted metallic silver and weaved a black ribbon through. You'll see in the photos shortly. I also made her this bodysuit that I'll be sewing her into. My pattern for this one went a little wrong. I had to add a couple of darts in the front and add an extra panel in the back, but at this point, I am totally fine with it. And with that, she's done. Finally. I've decided to call her Cassi after Cassiopeia. I wanted to name her after a constellation, and as Cassiopeia is upside down half the year, and this project was upside down about half the time I was working on it, I think it fits. But you know what? For as rough a ride as it was, I think she turned out super cute, so I can't be mad. What do you think of Cassi? Have you ever had a project that just kept going wrong in all sorts of ways? Did you finish it, or did you decide it was best to let it go? Both options absolutely valid, and I've done both. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and click the bell icon to get notified every time I post a new video. And the next one will be coming sooner rather than later, so keep an eye out for it. All my socials, including Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, will be linked down below in the description. And if you really enjoy my work and you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link to my Ko-fi tip jar down there too. And until next time, bye!